Okay, let's continue through chapter 9. And so I want to look at, just briefly mention estimating bad debts using aging of accounts receivable. So in our accounts receivable method, when we did estimating bad debts, we said, okay, this is our total accounts receivable, and we're going to multiply it times whatever percentage is uncollectible. The aging of accounts receivable method, it's similar to that receivable method in that it's based on accounts receivable, but instead of taking your total accounts receivable and multiplying it by the percentage of uncollectible, you're going to take categories of accounts receivable. So I have accounts receivable that are not yet due. I have accounts receivable that are 30 days past due, 60 days, 90 days, and so forth, past due. And then, of course, of those not yet, I may say, oh, they're only 2% uncollectible. And maybe the 30 days is 5% uncollectible, and 60 is 8%. And 90 days is 10%, and so on. So obviously, the older they are, the bigger the uncollectible percentage. And then you take those accounts receivable, multiply them by the uncollectible amounts, and then you get an amount. And once you do, you get your total of uncollectible. And then that's the number, similar to what you had in your receivables. That's the number that you want your ending allowance for doubtful accounts to be. Okay. And so look at that. Exhibit 911 on page 385 gives you a little bit more detail. Okay, let's move to notes receivable. Notes receivable is a written promise to pay a specified amount, including interest on a due date. So it's a written promise to pay a particular amount, including interest. And we haven't dealt with interest, so we want to look at that. And it's on a particular due date. Before we've been doing 210 net 30, where it's due in 30 days, you may get a discount. But this is a situation where you have an actual note due on a certain date, and you're going to pay interest. And so, in going over this, I like to do a quick study. I think that's the quickest way to do this one. And so we're going to look at Quick Study 9.9. Okay. In Quick Study 9.9 on August the 2nd. So that is not the abbreviation for August, sorry. On August the 2nd, I'm trying to erase this. On August the 2nd, we sign a note. And June receives a $6,090 day 12% note for customer Ryan Albany as a payment of his $6,000 account. Okay, so we signed this on August the 2nd. And it is a 90-day note. And so what does it do? It's kind of one of the things I do. First, what does it do? If I sign it on August the 2nd, it's a 90-day note. So I'm going to actually look at my days. It's a 90-day note. So if I sign it on August the 2nd, in August I have 29 days worth of interest. And then September, 30 days. That gets me up to 59 days. And then October the 31st, when I add that, that is my 90 days. So this is due on October the 31st. How much interest is due on this note? This is a $6,000 note, and it is a 12% interest. Okay, now I can't just take 6,000 times 12% because that interest rate is always stated at an annual rate. So that would give me interest for a year. But this is a 90-day note, so I want to get only 90 days. And so 90 days of interest is 180. So as far as my entries, when I originally received the note to pay an account, so this was probably a 210 net, 30 days came along, they're unable to pay the note. So what we would do is we would debit notes receivable. We would create a notes receivable for Albany in exchange for what was an account receivable, because now we're including interest in that. So that would be my entry on August the 2nd. And then on October the 31st, when I pay the note, and that's considered honoring the note. And so when a customer honors the note, they pay the note when it becomes due. And that's honoring the note. So when we honor the note, or when the customer pays the note, and honors it, then I would receive cash of $6,180. I'm going to receive the $6,000 plus the $180 worth of interest. And then so I want to get rid of the note receivable because they don't owe me anymore. So I originally debited notes receivable, and now I want to credit it. And then I want to recognize that I've earned interest revenue of $180. So that would be my entry if the customer honors the note. If the customer does not honor the note or dishonors the note, and that's what that means. That means that the customer does not pay. When the note is due. So they still owe me. They do not pay it. But pay the note when it becomes due. That's called dishonoring the note. So when we dishonor the note, a couple of things we have to do. The first thing I have to do is I need to switch the note receivable plus the interest that's due back to an account receivable. So what I would do is I would debit accounts receivable for $6,180. Now the interest plus the note receivable is now an account receivable. And so I would get rid of the note receivable off my books. And I would still recognize the interest. Because remember, revenues are recognized when they're earned. So I've earned it even though they didn't pay me. So I would do that. And then after that, I would go ahead and write it off against the allowance for doubtful accounts. So that's why I switch it back to an account receivable, so I can write it off against my allowance for doubtful accounts. And so then I would write it off by debiting allowance for doubtful accounts for $6,180 and crediting the accounts receivable for $6,180. So that would be honoring a note, dishonoring a note, and dealing with notes receivable. Okay, the last little piece here that I want to touch upon is sometimes you have a note receivable that you originally signed, let's say November the 1st, but it's not due until after the 1st of the year. So in there, I have December the 31st, but it's not due to the next year. So I need to recognize my interest earned at the end of the year on December 31st. So I would need to recognize my interest earned at the end of the year on December the 31st. So let's say that we have a note that we sign on November the 1st, and it is a 90-day note. So if I have a note that I sign and it's a 90-day note, when is it due? take a few minutes and figure out when is it due. I have a 90-day note. I'm going to kind of clean this up so I have some space to write. It's a 90-day note. When would it be due? Okay, so if November the 1st I sign a 90-day note, I have 29 days left in November. December has 31 days, so that gets me up to 60. So I know on December the 31st, the end of the year that I just talked about, I'm going to recognize 60 days worth of interest. And then the note would be due on January the 30th, because if I add another 30 days, that gets me to my 90. Okay, so on December 31st, if I had a $10,000 note at 10% interest, and remember it's a 90-day note, times 90 over 360, the interest on this note would be $250. Okay, and so on December 31st, I want to go ahead and book a receivable, because I'm not going to receive it on December 31st. I just want to recognize the revenue on December 31st. And I'm going to recognize revenue of 30 days worth of interest. So I can take the 250, which represents my 90 days worth of interest. I can multiply it times 60. I think I said 30. 60 over 90. And that gives me just 60 days worth of interest, which is 167. So I'm going to go ahead and recognize $167 worth of interest on December the 31st. I want to accrue. That's my end of the period adjustment for interest. I want to accrue my interest revenue. And then when the note becomes due on January the 30th, what I would like to do is I would need to go ahead and recognize the cash that I'm going to receive. I'm going to receive $10,250 cash. I'm going to receive my $10,000 originally owed plus the $250 worth of interest. I want to go ahead and show that interest receivable that I booked on December 31st of $167. I'm receiving that now. I originally debited it. Now I'm going to credit it. And then I need to recognize the other 30 days of interest revenue of $83. And then, of course, you need to get rid of the note receivable of $10,000. So that would be your interest. That would be your entry. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't really have any notes. Look in your books, but you can sell your accounts receivable, and then also you can use your accounts receivable. You can sell them for cash, and it's going to cost you a fee to do so. And then you can also pledge your accounts receivable as collateral to get a loan. And so you can do that as well. And so look at those two things at the end of the chapter. It was a long video. Hopefully it's helpful.